Speech is not violence. Speech is not a physical force capable of inflicting bodily harm on others and should not be treated as if it is. The fight for free speech isn't new. This struggle has been going on as long as there have been laws in place to restrict the expression of thought, which roughly coincides with the existence of states, but that's another story. I spent just a few minutes compiling stories about the government and university administrations acting to limit or ban certain types of speech and expression. I'll begin with SLAPP. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. These types of lawsuits are used typically to remove inconvenient opinions about businesses from the internet. Take this example of a woman who was sued after posting a negative review on Yelp. Her opinion was offensive to the dentist and quite possibly cost him money by the voluntary actions of people reacting to this woman's opinion. She voluntarily sought service from a dentist who voluntarily agreed to work on her. After, she was displeased, so she voiced her disapproval of the dentist's services. Nothing about anything in this process is immoral so far. But then the dentist had to go and ask the government to intimidate this woman into silence. Up in Canada, comedian Mike Ward made an edgy, distasteful joke about a person with a disease. As a result, he is being sued. If the plaintiff wins, this could essentially set precedents in Canada that insults are illegal. While I don't approve of insulting disabled people, I disapprove more of giving government the power to police speech. I have priorities. This is a map of countries in Europe in which it is a punishable offense to insult a head of state. To help put this in perspective, if laws such as this existed in the United States, Saturday Night Live would be in serious trouble. Because unfortunately, the person who decides if it's insulting or not is the person who has found themselves at the butt end of a joke. And politicians are notoriously thin-skinned. Speaking of which, a German comedian insulted Turkish President Erdogan and now faces up to 5 years imprisonment. While the jokes he delivered did carry some deliberate shock value, they were laced with political commentary regarding alleged political discrimination in Turkey against the Kurdish minority there. Angela Merkel, the Prime Minister of Germany, decided to press charges against the comedian as a way of apologizing to Turkey. Her hopes were to diminish political tensions between the two countries given the current immigration crisis. But now she's made Germany look more like an authoritarian state. Congrats, Merkel. Way to go. This is House Resolution 569 from the 114th United States Congress. Resolutions, for my friends outside the U.S., don't act as laws, but they do act to express the sentiments of United States elected officials. I've gone through briefly and highlighted things which concerned me and underlined things which are already illegal. They want us to know that they condemn violence, bigotry, and hateful rhetoric. Fine, so do I, and I want to make it clear that I do condemn hate speech. Most people do. What concerns me, however, is that violence is already illegal. Why would a lawmaking body want to make it known in the strongest terms that it denounces anything that's already illegal? Of course they denounce it. They imprison people for it. This is cause for concern because they are mixing what is already illegal and what is not yet illegal, namely bigotry and hateful rhetoric. It seems as if they are priming the public sentiment to be favorable of federal speech codes to criminalize hateful, insulting, or derogatory speech. We might be one step closer to thought crimes, but that's just what it looks like to me. We already see it in other countries, why not here too? Speaking of speech codes, no pun intended, there is a raging debate in academia on the subject. To help this debate along, I thought I would share some information gathered by the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. Link in the description. Speech codes on college campuses are policies which would limit or ban expression, which would otherwise be protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. According to the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, 54% of public and 59% of private universities implement some kind of speech code on their students. Furthermore, Department of Education guidelines make it so many more universities may implement speech codes in the coming years. The effects of these expression regulations are devastating to students' freedom of speech, as the following examples from FIRE will illustrate. Since 2009, there has been a surge in disinvitation attempts made by faculty and students to prevent certain speakers with unwanted opinions from coming to their campuses. Such speakers have included former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, feminist and critic of Islam Hirsi Ali, and director of the International Monetary Fund Christine Lagarde. A 2014 New York Times article cited a Rutgers student requesting trigger warnings for The Great Gatsby because of scenes which reference abusive misogynistic violence. In another book-related incident at Purdue University, Indianapolis, an employee was found guilty of racial harassment because of the cover art on the book he was reading aloud, Notre Dame versus the Klan: How the Fighting Irish Defeated the Ku Klux Klan, which was available in the school library. At the University of Delaware in 2007, students were required to undergo ideological re-education as part of the student-organized, university-mandated freshman orientation program. The program was described as treatment for students with incorrect attitudes or beliefs. Students were taught to adopt specific, approved views on politics, race, sexuality, sociology, moral philosophy, and environmentalism. They were also required to attend one-on-one meetings with their RAs in which they were asked personal questions like, "When did you discover your sexual identity?" Because that's something every student wants to discuss with their RA. Several years ago, Drexel University banned inappropriately directed laughter before revising the policy under pressure, and quite a few universities have confined unregulated expression to small free speech zones. Last, but certainly not least, citing statistics, or being skeptical of statistics, is now considered by some to be hate speech. In the case of climate change skepticism, some people like Bill Nye the Science Guy support imprisoning the unbelievers. But what I wanted to mention briefly was Christina Hoff Sommers, a staunch opponent to third-wave intersectional campus feminism, with a YouTube series called Factual Feminist, being labeled as a rape apologist or rape denialist because she is skeptical of the 1 in 5 statistic being used by third-wave feminists to advocate change. Though exactly what kind of change I've never exactly heard a feminist specify. Sommers typically quotes statistics like these from the Department of Justice to argue against statistics like these from the Center for Disease Control. She has never said that rape was good. She's never said rape doesn't happen. But she has said that misrepresenting the rate of rape on college campuses especially can lead to a culture of undue fear and paranoia. Her only goal is to find an accurate representation of reality before proceeding to shape policies and legislation. But because she hasn't jumped on board the rape rate hype train like the rest of her feminist colleagues, yes, she's a feminist, she has been branded as a rape apologist, which seems to be the most popular method employed by mainstream campus feminists to silence Sommers. But that's not all. If hate speech should be illegal, and arguing against bloated rape statistics with more reasonable rape statistics can be considered hate speech by virtue of rape apologism, then Sommers' arguments could land her in a prison cell in the near future if she isn't careful. The freedoms to criticize and argue are the only things that keep rampant misconceptions about the world from informing policies and legislation. Unfortunately for us, the people in charge of creating policies and legislation will never stop trying to silence their ideological opposition. Silencing someone is much easier than defending your own rubbish argument against attacks made by a good one. Free speech will always be under attack, and it's the duty of all those who see its benefits to continue on in its defense.